What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
Welcome to our show today. It is Wednesday, September 13th, 2017, middle of the weekday, hump day, starting that long, slow glide down to Powhatan on a Friday, and whatever weirdness is going to be happening next. And it does seem like the degree of chaos and confusion seems to be generally on the rise from all these different agendas that are at war with each other. We're going to start here with Hillary's Sour Grapes tour. It's not going as well as she dreamt it would, although it's going as well as most people expected it would. Every place that she's out there doing the book signings, she's being confronted by people who are asking about things like what happened to Seth Rich, what happened at Benghazi, what happened to Vince Foster, and of course Hillary's surrounded by security that if you ask an improper question, they'll just pitch you out of the room, and none too gently either. People are asking about the 33,000 emails, and I'm sure people are caught up in the fan worship, as it were, but the reality is the book is already discounted 40% on its release, so it's not expected to sell very well at all. Now, looking at some of the things she says in the book, a lot of people are just scratching their head and saying, what's going on here? Because apparently Hillary Clinton seems to think that George Orwell's 1984 was a book about the need to trust authority. And that really strikes a lot of people as delusional. It goes without saying that the entire premise of 1984 is centered on how an authoritarian state uses terror, manipulation of information, and the destruction of logic and reason to enforce total obedience and trust in leaders and experts. And another irony is that Hillary's entire campaign was based around her attempt to define reality by means of her crony relationship with the corporate media, with many journalists having been exposed by the Podesta email dump as being fully on board with the Clinton campaign and willing to write anything that she wanted. I mean, parallels can also be drawn between Orwell's Ministry of Truth, which destroyed information to bury history, and Hillary's own deletion of 33,000 of her emails. So that's definitely out there. And again, this is a continuation of the Hillary we've seen ever since Donald Trump won the White House. Blame everybody except her own failings. And apparently Hillary Clinton is slamming women who didn't vote for her and says she cannot grant absolution. I mean, there is an arrogant, ego-laden statement, that Hillary's in a position to grant absolution, that these women who didn't vote for her are sinners. It's that arrogance that really did work against Hillary Clinton. In another part of the book, she blames white people. Oh, it was those white people that were to blame for the election loss. Gosh darn those here. And then she goes off and she blames Bernie Sanders again. Right now, 61% of Americans polled are saying it is time for Hillary Clinton to retire gracefully and fade from the limelight. But she's apparently hooked on the fame, and she's out there. And the corporate media, they're still playing along with her. They're showing her at her book signings and all this other stuff and giving her all this attention. Another aspect that came out of the book, and by the way, apparently, I've heard the book has been leaked online. I don't know where, but apparently somebody's already put it on up there so you can read it without spending the money. But apparently, Hillary Clinton was so frustrated about the scandal of her private email server, she said she wanted to make voodoo dolls of various reporters and lawmakers and stick them full of pins. That's just a little bit out there, to be very, very honest. Now, Amazon is out there trying to protect their investment, and apparently it's already been noticed they're deleting negative reviews on the book. And apparently it was greeted with a torrent of criticism on the day it was released, and Amazon's just in there deleting all the negatives, leaving the positives. I don't think anybody's going to buy it. I'm certainly not going to buy it. I could care less about Hillary's more whining and shifting the blame and finding scapegoats. I'm really sick and tired of her. Now, there are some other things starting to happen surrounding Hillary, her time at the State Department, the email server. Apparently, the Department of Justice is seriously looking at charges against former director of the FBI, James Comey, because apparently in his handling of the email investigation, he breached protocol. He actually violated several federal rules and regulations, and even broke the law on a couple of occasions. And so they're looking at that. Meanwhile, Representative Franks is predicting that the Awan brothers and wife are going to get an immunity deal because they have got the goods on Debbie Wasserman Schultz. And a lot of people are very concerned that Debbie Wasserman Schultz is going to get really, really depressed and commit suicide by shooting herself in the back of the head 3 or 4 times. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates just rejoining our network here. Now, obviously, Monday was the anniversary, 16th anniversary of 9/11. We're still seeing a lot of repercussions coming on out of it. Story out of Pravda Report is saying 16 years later, no memory, no truth, no justice. Basically, the global media understands the official story is nonsense. That it is full of holes, it is full of contradictions, it is full, there are several cases where information is just ignored. I mean, the original 9/11 Commission report did not even mention building number 7 because they didn't have an explanation for how it could come down, so they just didn't include it. All righty, let's take a phone call from Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I think you made a mistake. I don't think it got leaked online. I think somebody took a leak on the book.
Well, I'm sure that's probably going to happen as well. I mean, but a lot of people are making jokes about it. It should have been titled What Really Happened. Plug, 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 plug. But, it's time for Hillary to just, go away.
I'm going to buy the book when it's 90% off because I can use more kitty litter when I shred it.
Okay.
But, Mike, what a joke she is, though. Like, what's her coming out and saying all this stuff? It proves one thing. I doubt she's going to run again because all this is great to use against her when she runs again. Let's go to page 300 and whatever, and you hate white people. You hate this, you hate that. Everybody's to blame, and she's a sociopath. No, hey, Mike, she's not the only one, but, she's a sociopath, but most of Washington is, and that's a scary thing with these people.
I agree. I agree with you. It's very scary. But again, when Hillary was running last year, there was a huge amount of material that could have been damaging to her. But again, as the Podesta email dump revealed, corporate media was fully on board the Hillary Clinton campaign. They were never going to report anything negative about her. They were constantly on the attack against Donald Trump. Now they have the temerity to come on out and say, well, the media was biased against Hillary Clinton and helping Donald Trump. That's absolutely the reverse of what was going on. And that's why people had to come to the independent media to find out this stuff about Cattlegate and Travelgate and all these other little scandals that the Clintons have been part and parcel to throughout the years. And it's, it's just amazing how hard the corporate media were working for Hillary Clinton to get elected. And some of them even admitted it right on the air. Yeah, we're out here. We're going to make sure that Hillary gets in there.
Especially down in Brazil. Hey, Mike, remember Matt Lauer? There's a rumor. Well, there was like a story like after Matt Lauer, after she got off that particular set, he was yelling at Donna Brazil and like cursing, and she's gonna get even with that Matt Lauer, and you can see where she's still angry at Matt Lauer.
Well, I think she's still angry at everybody. I mean, it's talk of voodoo dolls, and we know that on election night she physically assaulted John Podesta. The other staffers literally had to pull her off of him. She has a violent streak. I mean, all during the Clintons' rise to power, the governor's mansion, the White House, were all these stories about Bill Clinton showing up with a black eye in the morning, and Hillary just hurling ashtrays all over the place. She's got a temper.
Remember that's... Oh, sorry, Mike.
Go ahead.
Hello?
Go ahead.
Oh no, Mike. Remember when Hillary Clinton didn't have a concession speech because she definitely knew she was going to win. But yet, did you hear that other story where she bought the house next to the White House to put all her staff in? And so the game was rigged, and she still lost.
Yes.
Because something happened. The American people, figured it out. And but that's how rigged it was, against Bernie Sanders and the whole apparatchik. She thought she had it in the bag.
She did.
And she obviously didn't.
Yeah, and she thought she could. I mean, that's why she was never spending a lot of time out there on rallies. With the limitations on her health and everything, she knew she was going to steal it. And so she didn't have to go on out and actually work at courting the people. And that's why she had these little political rallies where there's maybe, 100, 200 people. And Donald Trump is out there filling up these sports venues. The reality is Donald Trump won that election by a huge, overwhelming margin that was able to overcome all the massive election fraud that Hillary was using to steal the election. The millions of illegal immigrant voters. Now we're finding out that Democrats from Massachusetts drove up into New Hampshire, which allows you to register to vote the same day, claimed they had just moved to the state, registered, voted for Hillary, then skedaddled back to Massachusetts and never got a new New Hampshire driver's license. And it's good that the President's Commission on Election Integrity is starting to look at this stuff. Because apparently they're finding it very shocking. I guess people in Washington, D.C. are kind of isolated from a lot of what goes on out here on the independent media, or even for that matter, HBO documentaries, because HBO had that documentary, Hacking Democracy. But apparently what I'm hearing is that the Commission on Election Integrity were completely taken by surprise by a report that these electronic machines are very easy to hack into, change the election result, and leave no trace that it's been done. Apparently this was news to a lot of them.
Hey, Mike, real quick on Syria, I want to switch topics. There's a report out that the Pentagon is scrubbing information on how they're still arming these moderate head chopper terrorist groups in Syria. And so you got the Pentagon and the CIA that's playing a double whammy with this crap. This is how not the Pentagon itself, but elements in the Pentagon, that's the thing. It's like you can't blame America when it's the U.S. government creating these policies, but you can blame a percentage of the population for being stupid not to know anything, but the same with the Pentagon or the CIA. There's good elements in there, but unfortunately the bad elements are in control.
Yeah, the bad elements get promoted. What can I tell you? We've got that report. We're going to be mentioning it. Apparently, it is a massive operation, and the Pentagon was trying to erase all of the records where they were taking these Soviet-era weapons and dumping them onto the anti-Assad forces in Syria. Same game that they played in Charlie Wilson's war. Went on out, got some Soviet-made weapons, and used them to arm the Mujahideen to try and conceal the fact that this was actually a U.S. covert action. Well, the lid's already been blown off of this thing. And everybody already knows the U.S. has been supporting ISIS and al-Qaeda. They were doing it certainly back when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State.
It's a different era, too. It's an era of missile tech and drone wars, and that's why it failed, and the Russians kicked the crap out of the terrorist proxies, because it's a different time now. Thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Well, one of the reasons that the Syrian forces and the Russian forces managed to push back on the U.S.-backed terrorists is those U.S.-backed terrorists, they're all mercenaries. They're there for a paycheck. They're not committed to victory at all costs. And so as soon as the battle turns against them, they're going to boogie on out there because they want to be alive to spend that paycheck. We're going to take a phone call from Tom in Indiana. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I'm calling you from Indiana.
Yes.
And I saw the urban rescuers that rescued the tennis shoes from the stores.
Yes.
And I think this would be great for a Nike commercial where they show these rescuers going in the stores, rescuing these Nike shoes and running out and showing that they're not caught, but yet in the next scene, it shows the lockup where they pan the bottom of the feet as people are sitting there, and showing everybody that these are not Nike shoes. So if you have Nike shoes, you can get away.
Well, I see where you're going with that. It may be, it's going to require some careful editing and some additional scenes there, but it's all well and good to make fun of the looters, but it is a serious problem, and apparently it's very widespread, and the police are just having a really hard time dealing with it down there in the disaster zone. They're now saying it could be as much as a month before all services are restored to the upper keys. And they're talking like the main stuff like electricity. They're not going to have that for weeks. And this is why this storm season has become an object lesson on how important it is to be a prepper, to be prepared to live off-grid when something bad happens, whether it's a hurricane, tsunami, nuclear war, whatever.
I'd like to talk to you a little bit about something a little bit more serious, so that was on a humorous note.
Yes.
On 9/11, I sat there because just before that, I got in a motorcycle wreck, and I was recuperating on the couch as I was watching 9/11 live. And as you know, I was a Vietnam veteran, and I was wondering why they didn't have a couple of Chinooks with grappling hooks that were flying over there to possibly rescue some of these people and ferry them over to the other buildings. And I was going to call in to New York to tell them to do this, but who am I to say? Don't they have smarter people than me that know all about this thing that they could have rescued these people?
Well, looking at how rapidly the smoke was blowing away from the buildings, the first thing that would occur to me is there was probably quite a bit of wind up on the tops of those towers, maybe more than would allow a safe landing or retrieval from some of those people.
Did you see the TV helicopters flying around getting the best shots for the Pulitzer Prize?
Yeah, but they weren't trying to land on the towers.
Flying around.
Yeah, it's one thing to fly around when you got a lot of room around you. It's another thing when you're actually trying to land on a building, with a major crosswind, especially in a helicopter. They're very, very tricky.
I'm not talking about landing. I'm talking about putting down a grappling hook on a line. That's what I'm talking about.
Well, so you're talking about like rescuing one person at a time per flight?
No, you could ferry them over to other buildings, to other rooftops.
One person on a grappling hook at a time?
Well, whoever could climb on there. I'm sure those people that jumped out of the building would have liked to have been 3 on one of those grappling lines.
Well, there are, grappling hook unfortunately has a negative connotation because it is pointy and sharp, but there are these jungle penetrator rescue units that were developed during Vietnam, and they can seat 3 people. And yeah, maybe if the stuff had been in position, they could have done it. But again, I think the issue is, with the wind up there, that device would be swinging back and forth and might actually kill the people you're trying to save.
Well, you can see what the result was when you didn't do that, and it could have been a cargo net. I just said grappling hook could fit anything that they could grab onto. That a Chinook or something like that could have, flown up there and done that.
Well, again, it looked to me, judging by the smoke coming from the building, that there was some serious wind up there at that altitude. And that's going to make it very, very tricky to accurately position that helicopter. Yes, those media helicopters were up there, but they don't have to be in a specific place to carry out a duty. They're just flying around in the empty space taking video. That's a far easier thing to do than trying to get some kind of a cargo net or something onto the top of the building without accidentally bringing your aircraft down or sweeping the people off the top. Anyway, Tom, we got to let you go. Take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back with another caller. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, as it turns out, a roof rescue for the World Trade Towers in 2001 would not have been possible because access to the roof was locked. Now, remember when the World Trade Center was bombed in 1993, there was a rooftop rescue where a helicopter landed and took 28 people to safety, but it was denounced as a publicity stunt. And between that and the Philip Petit, who was the tightrope walker who walked between the two towers, the Port Authority decided the towers' roofs were going to be kept locked to prevent people from committing suicide or launching more stunts from the top, people who were afraid of base jumpers. So the reality is nobody could have gotten to the roof on 9/11, and that is pretty much the end of that. Okay, Carrie, I'm sorry, James in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, I wanted to talk about, you're right, this last storm season is perfect to show how much prepping you need to have prepping, because I'm from the coastal Bend area, and they still don't have, like you heard, there's so much disaster here. There's nobody's really got any help. And here's the ironic thing, the funny thing: the people who stay in those houses on the coastal Bend, they get to stay on their property, but the ones who went to the shelters, they can go back to their property, but they can't stay there. And isn't that kind of ironic, how you still have to pay the taxes and you can't go back there? And it just shows that I don't even think they're too worried about a crash, because they have the gold and everything. And what they're going to do is what they did in Zimbabwe when they were crashing, just give more money to the police and to the army. And then they're going to cut all the social benefits and privatize it like that. Because if you look at the stolen gold that they have from Ukraine, Libya, I mean, Libya alone is 143 tons. Iraq is another 89. Venezuela, that's 167.
Yeah, but Venezuela's gotten some of their gold back, as has Germany, and more and more of these countries. I think there are 8 countries now that are making a big stink. You know, why can we not have our gold bullion back? And everyone's getting sick and tired of the excuses coming out of the New York Fed, J.P. Morgan, the Bank of France, and the Bank of England. Everyone's wondering, where has the gold really gone? And, you know, is there really still the American people's gold inside Fort Knox, or has somebody actually pulled off a gold finger and robbed Fort Knox?
Do you think, I have a question for you. Do you think they expect us to, like, lose it? Because you don't think they'll be able to handle the looters if something like that will happen. And then, like, if people are starving, do you think they expect us to, like, throw guns blazing? And that's why you see the militarizing of the police, because, I mean, people, if they are hungry and they got weapons, but hopefully, I hope it doesn't come to that, but do you think that's what they're planning for? That's why you see all these preparations.
Yeah, definitely the militarization of the police. The U.S. government is obviously preparing for a massive civil uprising in this country, and I think if you look at what's going on over at St. Martin, in the Caribbean, they have literally run out of food. And everybody is in a panic. If they don't get some food in there, they're going to be eating each other inside of a week. And we could see the same thing happening here in the United States during an economic collapse.
Yeah, Houston, from what I read, the number of homeless people at the top of the storm was about close to 500,000. So, you know, and then have you heard any latest news on the conditions and yourself? I know I haven't, of anybody, like, because I heard they're still reflooding neighborhoods.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine these people could very well have drowned, and unless their bodies are caught on something, they could very well wash out to sea with the floodwaters and never be heard from again. It's not like anybody's really tracking the homeless people. They can die and vanish, and nobody will really notice except the people, you know, who are used to seeing them around all the time. Gee, I wonder where Joe went. All right, we got to take it.
Those guns that were flooded in the homes are no good, right?
The guns? Depends on whether they're stainless steel and what kind of ammunition they had. James, I got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're going to take another phone call from Carrie in Wisconsin. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike.
School shooting out in Washington State. One deceased and 3 in the hospital.
Yes. Terrible tragedy in Spokane High School. First question that comes to mind is, was the shooter on prescription psychiatric medication? And then there's the other idea of young people growing up today. What kind of an example are they getting from our government? Because for kids who are just entering high school right now, for as long as they've been alive, the government example has been, if somebody doesn't do what you want, you shoot them, you drone strike them, you bomb them. And the kids are growing up watching this as a model, and after a while they're going to start emulating that.
Yeah, it's not a good situation, that's for sure.
Okay.
But, it happened sometime between 10 and noon today, and I'm watching. They got an interview right now on one of the satellites, 103 West, and they're more or less updating everybody.
Yeah, well, I know they put all the schools in the area on lockdown, even though the situation is over. But it is a tragedy. And again, we have to ask, are prescription psychiatric medications a factor? Along with, and the two are not mutually exclusive, again, look at the real-world example set by our government, even by our police now. If somebody doesn't do what you want, you shoot them, you tase them, you pepper spray them. And the kids are going to pick up on that. And I think that's one of the reasons we're seeing so much violence in our societies. We have a violent government.
Yeah, I don't know who the shooter is yet. They didn't really come out with anything. That might come out later on in the news, but everything is still kind of hush-hush.
Well, I think Washington State has laws protecting juvenile defendants. We don't know how old the perpetrator was. He may be shielded for the time being, or they may come out with it a little bit later. Anyway, Carrie, I'm going to let you go. Thank you for the update on the school shooting here. Apparently, they're saying they're now getting into Florida to assess the damage, and President Trump is visiting Naples, Florida tomorrow to look at the damage. But they're saying like 90% of the homes suffered damage. Places look like a bomb went off. We're going to go back to the phones here. Steve in Massachusetts, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I just want to go over with you the certain things that happened over the past month that made me think that maybe perhaps this fall, maybe when we're going to get a reset. If you look at Steve Mnuchin, when he went to Fort Knox, he said everything's okay.
Yeah.
Why would he go into there all of a sudden? No one has been there for 70 years, and all of a sudden he's just reassuring people that, oh yeah, everything's okay with the gold.
And he didn't actually go in and count any of it. He just walked into the building and walked back out and said, no, everything's just fine here, which is hardly credible here. But there are other indicators we need to look at. We reported on yesterday how we're starting to hear from the IMF and from the United Nations that as of January next year, they want a global reserve currency that is not linked to the United States. Everyone is getting very nervous about being forced to rely on the U.S. dollar as a reserve currency because it is so unstable and untrustworthy. And, of course, the instant that happens, it is definitely game over. Now, right now, the United States has been launching wars against everybody who moves away from the dollar. Saddam Hussein in 2002, Gaddafi, same thing. But if the whole world drops the dollar all at the same time, there's nothing the United States can do about it.
Yeah, and you look at other things, too. Trump, suddenly has decided to arm the police with military gear. You got Steve Fisher, the chairman of the Fed. He says he's going to leave in October. there's a lot of stuff that's going on. It's very suspicious.
Yeah, I don't think they can't hold it together much longer. They're running out of duct tape and baling wire. Somebody actually wrote in to tell me that apparently there's a military study that shows starving people will kill to eat after 10 days of having no food and will start eating other people at 15 days. And I have to wonder how the military knows this to be true. Boggles the imagination here. But yeah, when there's an economic crash in this country, if they don't have an enemy to blame it on, the American people are going to say this is all the fault of the Wall Street crooks and a federal government that just looked the other way and let it happen. And there's definitely going to be a run on tar and feathers and rails.
Mike, when did you hear that report from the military?
Somebody just sent it to me in the email.
I was going to say, because isn't that kind of suspicious too? I mean, here they're coming out with a report, all of a sudden.
Well, like I said, I'm rather, wondering how they came up with these numbers here. But we do know that hungry people will turn on each other. That's what happened down on Rapa Nui when they killed off all the trees to use as rollers to build a moai, and the food supply collapsed. They turned on each other. Anyway, Steve, we're going to let you.
Oh, can you hold me over for 1 second?
Well, we still got a little bit of time. I thought you were done. What do you know?
Okay. You're a Star Trek fan, right?
Yeah.
Okay. You were talking about Israel yesterday, how Israel kind of sits back and watch, the U.S. and its enemies fight against each other. Well, there's a Star Trek episode I remember that it had an entity that kind of hovered above.
Day of the Dove.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. And they just watched the enemies fight against each other.
Yep.
And the only way to combat it is, did you see that?
Yeah. Like I said, BBC is rerunning the original series. And they've telecined it for high def. So we're seeing it certainly a lot clearer than we did on the old NTSC TV sets of the 1960s. Plus, they've gone to the trouble for the sequences with the spaceships. Many of them have been redone with computer animation. And so they're looking a lot better. It's a little more up to date. But in the end, what made the original Star Trek series so impactful were the scripts. Where Roddenberry put everybody out in space so it was sort of safe to talk about certain topics, and the scripts addressed the social ills of the time, and young people just plugged into that. And, of course, ultimately there was a problem with Star Trek so engaging its audience, they weren't paying attention to the commercials, and it was for that reason that NBC literally killed the show in its third year by moving it to Friday night, which is when all the young people who were the Trekkies would be out at football games and parties and so forth and so on. But even so, I mean, it's done amazingly well in syndication. We just had the Hawaii version of Comic-Con out here, and apparently Shatner and everybody from the original series who's still with us were down there as well, and just having a fine old time here.
Didn't they want to kill that the first season?
Yeah.
Star Trek?
Yeah, NBC wanted to cancel Star Trek the first season because it was getting very high Nielsen's but very low Burke scores. And the Burke scores are the important ones to the advertisers because it's how well people remember the commercials. And so the advertisers were having a trouble. And there was this letter writing campaign that was launched, and it literally just flooded NBC executive offices. And finally they made an on-air announcement, yes, we're bringing the show back next year. So Star Trek was a huge success. It was a bigger success in syndication. And the modern offshoots today, though, very rarely are they as daring at challenging social norms as the original series. And yes,
that's true.
Their production values are a lot better, and it's very cool. But mostly these days, it's technical jargon and variations on the theme of us against some alien. It really has not been the same thing since Roddenberry's passing. Anyway, we're going to let you go here, and thank you very much for the phone call. And, I'm a Star Trek fan. I wouldn't consider myself a Trekkie. I'm not a fanatic about it. I don't dress up and do the ears or anything like that. But, I did work on the first of the Star Trek feature films, and that was a big thrill for me as well here. Okay, getting on back to the news. Hillary Clinton is still out there trying to sell the idea that Trump is working with Russia, even though we all know Hillary Clinton has much stronger ties to Russia. There's the Uranium One deal. There's all the money from Russia that came into the Clinton Foundation. And it's interesting because she was out there being interviewed on TV, and she came on out and said that James Comey should not have been fired over the Russia investigation, which nobody has actually proven that's what happened. That's what Mueller is trying to find, but he can't find any evidence of it. Then Hillary goes on and said, but James Comey should have been fired over the way he handled that email investigation. So she's out there playing victim. At the same time, she's still trying to maintain this idea that Trump and Russia are swapping wet, sloppy kisses with each other, which is just complete and utter nonsense. There's nothing there. Huge amounts of evidence of wrongdoing by the Clintons, the Bushes, the CIA, the Department of Justice, James Comey, Loretta Lynch. And Robert Mueller's just out there saying, I don't see anything except what I want to see, and what I want to see is anything that allows us to impeach Donald Trump. Now, here in Hawaii, some educator got it into their head to have a 9/11 drill, which consisted basically of this school official wearing a mask, swinging a hammer, screaming and threatening to kill them all. And the school officials are claiming that this drill was done for the safety of those children, but of course the children were traumatized. They were just absolutely traumatized. And so Michelle and Eddie Chavez, parents of one of the children, have filed a federal lawsuit. And that's the idea. So these drills are not about safety drills. It's like you hear about these lockdown, shelter-in-place, active shooter drills. They don't announce there's a drill ahead of time. They'll just run through the school, firing off guns and terrifying and traumatizing everybody. It's a form of brainwashing. Now, when we were kids and we had the fire drills at the school, they would announce ahead of time, we're going to have a fire drill. And when the bell rings, you will do this. And we'd sit there waiting, and the bell would ring, and we'd all do what we were supposed to do. That's how you have a drill. You don't just have a surprise terror attack on a bunch of kids who've got no way of knowing it isn't real. To traumatize them, to get them, to just condition them to be shocked at the sight of a gun or black Nomex. Anyway, getting on back to St. Martin, the food and water have vanished from every single grocery store in St. Martin, and they're just scavenging whatever they can find. Water, crackers, fruit, any food that's out there growing. And apparently there are groups of people who are armed, are now stealing anything of value that was left, like electronics, appliances, even vehicles are being stolen. The social fabric has definitely broken down, and that does happen when you have a major disruptive event like a hurricane or an economic collapse. Now, over in Texas, where Hurricane Harvey piled on through and the storm surge overwhelmed toxic waste sites and the water treatment plants, and now the cities basically have raw sewage in the streets as the systems overflow. Gee, wouldn't it be nice if the government spent as much on our country as they spend on blowing up other people's countries? Because it's a whole different scale of spending. I mean, when you look at literally trillions of dollars being spent to blow up other countries, and how much that just 1 trillion would improve our infrastructure. Remember, 20 years ago, engineers in Houston were saying, we're going to get flooded if we don't start building up this stuff. No, we can't afford to build up this stuff. We have to go bomb Libya. It's not one thing, it's another. Okay, we're going to take a phone call from Joey in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. I got a computer question. It's very simple. The last 6 months, when I view your program on my laptop, I don't know what the verbiage is in high-tech stuff, IT stuff, but I'm going to use the word dropping. You drop for about a second or two, and it's very difficult to understand the program. And the only way I can benefit is I wait till 7 o'clock when you're done, and I go on the podcast, and it's perfectly clear.
Well,
you have an explanation.
Yeah, the podcast is streaming from RBN servers. The video is coming from a company called BAM User, and I pay them for the video service. But apparently, my show is so popular, there are a lot of people who are trying to watch it at the same time. Now, what I can try and do is lower the resolution and the frame rate on the video and try and keep the priority on the sound. But the other problem may be that a lot of internet service providers are starting to sort of renege on the promised bandwidth. And we know that some, like Spectrum, has been sued. For failing to deliver the bandwidth they claim they're delivering. So it may be that you might want to go to one of those websites that test your internet connection and see how much bandwidth you actually have if you're getting everything that you're paying for. But what I'll do is I'll try and fine-tune the BAM User application at this end. I'll lower the video resolution and frame rate, and that will throw the priority back over to sound, okay?
Oh, okay. One other thing, it only happens on your podcast, though. If I go on any other site, I have no problem whatsoever.
Well, we have a lot of people trying to attack. We have a lot of people trying to interrupt us. Joe, we got to let you go. We got to take a commercial break. Thank you very much. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our shows. We're coming up to the top of the hour, and we're going to take a phone call from Mo in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. I just catching up on your shows. I'm down here in East Florida, and we didn't get a lot of damage, but we had some power outages. But anyways, that said, I want to just say something. I know your position on the McCain, USS McCain, and the whole thing. But you know, I heard do you know who Bill Holter is?
Yes.
Yeah, he was on I forget what show the other day, and you know, he mentioned a very interesting thing. And I remember, you know, you always say look for what should be there but isn't. And he mentioned on both those ships, USS McCain, I can't remember the other one, but there were no scrape marks on those hulls. Those ships were, there's absolutely no way, and I think he made sense, because those things had to be dead in the water. And my point is, I think that with the Donald Cook, remember they froze them?
Yeah.
I think these people, I think the Chinese, I think the Russians, I think they got us on the cyber warfare, and I just think there had to be scrapes on them hulls, or those things were not underway, Mike.
Well, it doesn't matter if you're underway or not. If you impact another ship, there's going to be signs of the damage, and there were photos showing where the damage occurred on both those ships. Now, the Navy is basically taking the position this was not a cyber attack, and it wasn't a deliberate attack by China or Russia or anything. There's a training problem with the crews in the Pacific Fleet where they're inexperienced, and they just didn't understand the rules of right away. They apparently were sailing in front of these cargo ships, assuming that the cargo ships would slow down for the mighty United States Navy fleets, a global force for good. And that didn't happen because, again, according to the recognized order of right-of-way, those super tankers and cargo ships come first because they can't turn quickly, they can't slow down very quickly, and the other ships have to give way.
I totally agree with that, but there have to be scrape marks. It's impossible when you look at you know what happened. There have to be scrape marks. These ships, I believe, Michael, were dead in the water. And
I disagree. I mean, if you look at the damage to the other ships, obviously those ships were hit amidships, especially the second one was hit amidships, and I disagree. Occam's razor, it was just a stupid Navy crew. All right, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go here and get back to the news. And there we are. Now then, Florida police are being kept busy by looters, burglars, and scammers taking advantage of Irma. In fact, there was even a little blurb just on Fox News here where they're trying to bring in more police force. Apparently, it is shameful when you have a situation like this to just go on out and start looting like crazy. And it may well be that a lot of those people don't even live there. It's looting tourism. We saw that during the Rodney King riots. People from the San Fernando Valley were driving down to South Central to get on board all of that stuff. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I'm looking at USA Today, and there are photographs of the damage to the USS John S. McCain. So this idea that there's no signs of scrapes or anything, that's utter ridiculousness. Occam's razor. The simplest explanation is usually going to be the right one here. Alrighty, getting on back here. Needless to say, everybody is still trying to jump on the hurricanes for whatever agenda they're serving. And apparently, retired Georgia Tech professor Judith Curry did a blog post basically saying it was scientifically irresponsible to tie the intensity of Hurricanes Harvey and Irma directly to climate change. There was a huge, huge backlash, including calls for her imprisonment. And that right there tells you they know the science does not support their claims when they're out there screaming, throw them in jail, burn the heretics. Now, here's a story that came out of the Gateway Pundit. Apparently, the Red Cross has been accused of stealing donations from church doorsteps to redistribute, or in some cases, actually sell them. And oddly enough, the Red Cross is claiming that this is protected by Executive Order 13603, signed by Barack Obama back in 2012. And the order provides the framework and authority for allocation or appropriation of resources, materials, and services to promote the national defense. So, really, that's not very nice to steal from a church. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Steve in Virginia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Thank you. I was calling about, you had a gentleman just a few minutes back who said he was having trouble watching or listening to your program in a live feed.
Yeah.
I had experienced the same thing. And then I did some research, and I think you're fully aware there was a place that does a live RBN broadcast through the day. It's wrh.thebattler.com. It steadied me very well because I could listen to you because watching was not a priority, just listen to your program. And I thought I'd just put that out there, maybe help somebody else out.
Okay, what was that URL again?
It's wrh.thebattler, BATTLER.com.
Okay.
And it comes up, and right now you're running live on it, and I can hear you very clear. Occasionally I have a problem on my end, but I know that's almost guaranteed my end.
You need to email me that URL because this is saying the URL does not exist, so I obviously misunderstood that. But if you could click that little email link at the top of whatreallyhappened.com and type out the URL and send it in, I'll look at that. But again, I'm going to try and fine-tune the BAM user feed. And ultimately, I spend a lot of money on this BAM user system every month. Sometimes I think maybe I ought to just, shut it off. Because
I had a lot of problems, and I finally found an alternative way, at least to be able to listen to the program, which I'm always doing something else anyway, so that was fine with me. And this is how I found, and I will send you that link as soon as I get it.
Actually, I got the link to work here. I got the link to work here, and I didn't even know this page was out there. Wow.
I found it about a month or so back.
Wow, I'm stunned. I had no idea that was out there. All right, well, listen.
With your name, and when I pop it up, it's got your picture on it. I kind of figured you may know about it, but somebody's doing you a great service.
Oh yeah, they are. There's no question. There's no question. It's an RSS feed, and everything's just fine there. Anyway, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Now,
thank you.
Thank you. In another example of how corporate media is not interested in the truth or the facts of any matter, but just whatever they can grab and spin. There's been another nothing burger where the corporate media attempted to claim that a Russian politician admitted that the government of Russia stole the 2016 election. And this comes under the heading of lost in translation because the politician was actually mocking the U.S. intelligence community. He was making a joke. And the corporate media said, oh, he's admitted they stole the election. That's all we need to go to war, blah, 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 blah. No, Russia did not steal the election. Hillary Clinton tried to steal the election, and she failed. The millions of illegal immigrants, the Massachusetts Democrats who drove up to New Hampshire, how much more do you need? Look at how they cheated Bernie Sanders out of the nomination. We don't need to go to Russia to find out who was mucking about with our democracy last year. Now, as I mentioned, President Trump's Commission on Election Integrity is actually out there doing work. They were up in New Hampshire, and they are now hearing from experts like Ronald Rivest, who's a professor at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, basically saying these electronic voting machines are wide open to fraud. And you and I, we already know that because of the HBO documentary, Hacking Democracy. We know about it because of Bev Harris and her website, blackboxvoting.org. And now the Election Commission knows it as well. And this is coming on top of the decision by the state of Virginia. They are dumping all their electronic voting machines because they were prompted to do a security test, and not one of the machines that they are using in the state was able to pass. So they're getting into that one here. All right, let's see. Going to take a phone call. Roxanne in Texas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello?
You're on the air.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to alert your listeners also to, you can download it. It's called TuneIn Radio, or TUNEIN. I get real great reception off of that.
Okay.
That's all.
All right. Well,
good afternoon.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Wow, I didn't realize all this stuff was out there. Congress has now passed a resolution against hate groups, but they're very narrow in defining what hate groups are. They're condemning the neo-Nazis, the KKK, and white nationalists. They are not including violent black groups such as Black Lives Matter and Antifa. And this is apparently a message to Donald Trump from the Congress. You will blame the people we tell you to blame for what happened in Charlottesville. And of course, Trump wasn't going to go along with that. Now, Rand Paul proposed a defense bill amendment to repeal the authorization for the use of military force, these open-ended declarations by Congress where the president can just go to war wherever he wants. And he sought to repeal the 2001 AUMF, the 2002, and so forth and so on. Unfortunately, the Senate has voted it down. So it was a nice thought. But I guess all those senators dream of being president one day and just having the ability to say, I think I'm going to go and bomb Liechtenstein. Just because we can. Now, the U.S. government is beginning censorship of media through disingenuous means. In one example, the bill that is funding the CIA and NSA for another year includes a provision that outlaws WikiLeaks as this dangerous non-state propaganda enemy. That's how they're going to try and get around the First Amendment there. And they're not going to be able to shut it down. People will go through proxies. People will pass the information fax machine to fax machine like they did in the old Soviet Union. Now, the other thing that they're doing is they're going to all of these media outlets that are challenging the U.S. corporate media, and they're declaring them foreign agents, making them go through the paperwork of saying, yes, I'm a foreign agent, I confess I'm working for blah, 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 and trying to find ways to shut them down. Meanwhile, our own corporate media continues to show that they have got no editorial standards whatsoever. CNN made a big story out of this very bizarre research program that sought to equate the destruction of the World Trade Towers with cholesterol level in teenagers. And the report is a spectacular failure if you read it all the way through, but CNN just ran with it. Oh, the dust from 9/11 affected the cholesterol levels in teenagers. Have you noticed how the American corporate media is starting to get much more tabloid-like? They really are. Serious, heavy news is gone. It's all celebrity stuff. What is, the Kardashians up to now? What's Madonna up to? Rather disgusting here. There's been a new development regarding what happened at that consulate in Benghazi, and apparently the security of the State Department's Benghazi compound was so poor that another contractor was brought in to clean up the mess just 2 weeks before the 2012 terror attack, and then later on was pressured to keep quiet by a government bureaucrat under then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. This is coming from the American security company. And they'd gone up against the security company that had the contract, but the people who had the contract were failing miserably to keep the place safe. And so 2 weeks before the actual attacks, they were brought on in and then told to shut up about it. All right, we're going to go back to the phones. Glenn in Philadelphia. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I was hearing people talking before about the cannibalism potentiality, and it's always been like the conventional wisdom that, from the time of a major disaster, societal breakdown, to cannibalism is about 2 weeks. The 10 days only applies in the presence of an ample supply of gravies, sauces, and condiments.
Mm-hmm.
And it tastes like chicken for the most part anyway. But that's all.
Okay.
But anyway, and that was a day joke. One other question: what's a fax machine?
It's what the Soviet citizens used to bring down the Soviet government a while back, because they didn't have computers. Okay.
Oh, I see. I think I might have seen those once before.
Yeah, you stick the paper in, and a copy comes out at a remote location. And actually, most document centers actually still have a fax machine in there. I just don't want to spend the money for a dedicated fax line. All right, Glenn, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. And I remember this Monty Python sketch where these sailors are in a lifeboat, and they're talking about eating one of their own, and it gets out of control. And there is historical precedent for that. And again, if you go back to the story of the Essex, which was the real-life whaling ship incident on which Herman Melville based his novel Moby Dick, there was really some goings-on like there. Anyway, turning to Syria, very interesting article coming out of Inside Syrian MC, how the U.S. doesn't intend to give Deir ez-Zor to the Syrian army. Now, as you know, the Syrian army, backed by Russian air power, broke the years-long ISIS siege of Deir ez-Zor. And the residents of the city were greeting the liberators, and it was all a really good time. But we're getting all these little indications that the U.S. is not happy about this. And we're hearing about how the U.S. Helicopters are evacuating the senior ISIS commanders before the Syrian army can get to them. And now we have this story here about how the Pentagon is spending $2 billion running Soviet-era guns to the Syrian rebels. And the Department of Defense is still funneling all this into Syria with questionable oversight. In a joint report published Tuesday, the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project and the Balkan Investigative Reporting Network allege the Pentagon has given up to $2.2 billion worth of weapons to groups like the Syrian Democratic Forces and the Kurdish People's Protection Units, or the YPG. The program sidesteps long-established checks on international weapons trafficking, the report alleges, and appears to be turbocharging a shadowy world of Eastern European arms dealers. Now, this is exactly the same thing the United States did in Afghanistan when the Soviets were in there. They went around to other countries and they bought up these Soviet-era weapons and smuggled them into the Mujahideen, so that if the Mujahideen were captured and the weapons were captured, there was no trail back to the United States, even though pretty much everybody knew what was going on. And the same thing applies now. They're going to go through this thing about saying, well, they're Soviet weapons, you don't know they came from us, but the lid is already blown on this. Besides, some of ISIS are now sporting these new American-made modified M14 rifles. So it's a huge mess. Now, at this point, most of the people in Syria are saying the war is pretty much over. We've got some mop-up to do, but this war is over. And a Syrian diplomat is saying it is time for the U.S. to withdraw its military personnel. And if the U.S. does not, the Syrian army will regard them as a hostile force on Syrian territory. Now, that is going to put the U.S. government in a very serious bind, because their presence in Syria is illegal under international law. The government of Syria is asking them to leave. And if the U.S. refuses and they get into a firefight with the Syrian forces, it's basically an unprovoked war, unprovoked invasion by the United States. And all these decades of selling these wars as we're bringing democracy to these people, and it's an evil tyrant this and that, it's all going to be destroyed. The world, and most importantly the American people, are going to see the U.S. government for the aggressor that it is. Now, Hezbollah has already declared a victory in Syria. The Russian Defense Ministry is saying that basically pro-government forces have liberated 85% of the country from militants, and the Syrian army is now preparing to cross the Euphrates River. So it's all over but the shouting. The only thing the U.S. can do to turn this around, and it is seen as a huge defeat for the United States, is just outright invasion. Nuke the place. And that's not going to go over very well with hardly anybody. But we all know about the lies. Assad is gassing his own people. No, he wasn't. Assad's a cruel tyrant. No, he's won the last several elections. And international observers said the elections were honest. International observers were not even allowed into our country last year. We're not really after Syria. We're just there to get ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And then we find out they're giving weapons and supplies to ISIS and Al-Qaeda. How many more times do you have to be lied to by this government before you understand in your heart of hearts that you live under a government that lies to you? You live under a government that thinks you're an easily fooled moron that can be tricked into doing whatever the government wants with just a few carefully chosen words. You should be insulted. You should be angry about that. Now, another indication about the declining American empire, Turkey's President Erdogan has announced on Tuesday Turkey has signed a deal to purchase a Russian surface-to-air missile system. And so this deal cements a recent rapprochement with Russia, despite differences over the war in Syria. Basically, Turkey is pivoting toward Russia and away from NATO. Meanwhile, Israeli media is begging the United States to prepare for war with Syria, Russia, and Iran. Oh, yes, you've got to go kill those people for us, those evil Russians, those evil Syrians, those evil Iranians. And it really is very, very obvious that Israel expects our government to send our kids out to fight the people Israel doesn't like. Talk about being under puppet rule. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the telephones. Terry in Oregon. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Talking about the Syrian mop-up campaign, I think you ought to just keep going down to the Golan Heights and clear that all out. That's also illegal. And Hezbollah, as far as I'm concerned, is not a terrorist organization. It's an organization that protects the sovereignty of nations like Lebanon and Syria, and maybe they could use them down there too, because they're stealing the resources of the country.
That's true. Israel is out there. Israel has never formally drawn their borders because they want to keep moving them. Now they're trying to say that the Golan Heights has always been a part of Israel. That's as big a whopper as any of the others that Israel has said over the years. The same thing with trying to grab the West Bank and just annexing more and more of it. All of these are violations of international law, but as long as the U.S. ambassador to the UN is going to veto any attempt by the Security Council to reign in Israel, then Israel is going to behave like the spoiled little brat it's become.
Yeah, and our government just bows down to them, and they use them like somebody using a mule to plow a field, you know?
Yeah, very much so, and it's been really bad ever since 9/11, which is why I think that Israel is actually blackmailing the U.S. government over 9/11, saying, you know, you don't give us what we want, and we'll tell the world what really happened on 9/11, and it'll be worse for you than for us, because everybody expects Israel to do things like this. You know, but when your own American people find out that you were part of this huge, horrendous war-starting hoax, you're not going to be in office for very, very long. And looking at Israel's arrogance, it really took off after 9/11. They have a handle on the U.S. government now. The U.S. has lost any image of impartiality or being objective with regard to the Middle Eastern situation. And, whatever Israel wants, Israel gets. Oh, and by the way, you know that yesterday we were talking about how Tillerson wanted to ask Israel to return $75 million in aid that they'd been overpaid last year. Not going to happen. Imagine my shock. No, the State Department isn't even going to ask. You know.
Yeah, plus they never give back territory either, so that's another obstacle.
Yeah.
But, the whole U.S. government is infiltrated over the years, gotten stronger and stronger with Zionist neocons. You know, they control, they're a deep state, and they control whoever's, run the government. But hey, Mike, anyway, good talking to you, and I'll get off and let somebody else have a chance.
All right, thanks an awful lot here, and we're going to switch to Lou in California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, guten Abend. Wie geht's?
Wie geht's es Ihnen?
Wie geht's es Ihnen? We're high and dry. It's not so hot anymore today, Mike.
Good.
Mike, yeah. Mike, did you have anything? I don't know if you mentioned it earlier in the show about the three biggest credit companies or banks that have some kind of fraud case going on, in which a lot of a million people or so have been affected by it.
Well, we're going to mention this a little bit later in the show when we get into computers. But, yeah, the Equifax breach is only the latest in a long series of these credit companies losing the data. The whole system is broken down. It is not secure. And this information is out there on the dark web, and lives are being ruined by it. And it basically shows us it was an absolute mistake to trust our information to these large companies and their computers. They have absolutely dropped the ball in terms of taking care of their customers. And I think they ought to be sued. I know there's a class action lawsuit against Equifax But they really ought to be sued. And maybe it's time for people to just pay off their credit cards and go back to a cash-only system. Because if you're using cash-only, then the dark web can't grab your wealth by using your Social Security number if you're using cash.
Okay. Equifax. What was the other company that was involved in the credit? Let's see.
I'm going to have to wait till I get down to that part of the talking points because I don't remember off the top of my head. Anyway, Lou, got to let you go. Got to take another break for commercials, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And before we get back to the news here, I'm looking at an email that came in from Southern California saying that they have no problem with my BAM user stream, that there are no dropouts, and they're saying instead of me pulling back on the resolution and frame rate, people need to start checking about if they're getting the bandwidth into their home they think they're supposed to be, which is a growing problem in this country. But I think we'll strike a happy medium because it's not like you need to look at my face. So lowering the video resolution and the frame rate, I don't think is going to really disrupt the experience all that much. The important part is the audio track here. And again, if you cannot get it over BAM user, you can always get it at republicbroadcasting.org, listen-live. And there is a link to that also at whatreallyhappened.com. Now, we're talking about Israel. And apparently Israel is very unhappy with Amnesty International for talking about all of Israel's war crimes in the region. And Israel wants to go on committing the war crimes. They just don't really think anybody has a right to criticize them or judge them. And the latest assault that they have against Amnesty International is they're attempting to have its tax-exempt status revoked. And, of course, Amnesty is very upset about that. They're saying they have not been officially informed of any such action by the authorities. But, again, Israel wants to do what Israel wants to do, and anybody who gets in their way, well, just too darn bad here. Now, there are some interesting things happening over in Saudi Arabia. First of all, there was that secret meeting between the Crown Prince and Netanyahu, even though these countries officially have no diplomatic relations. That may be about to change. Apparently, Saudi forces have started arresting opponents of the ruling family right now, and there is a rumor that King Salman bin Abdulaziz Al Saud is going to abdicate his throne in favor of his son, the current Crown Prince Mohammed. Because the elder king, he's not doing very well, and the Crown Prince has been effectively the head of Saudi Arabia, but they're going to make it official here. Apparently, Prince Abdul Aziz bin Fahd Al Saud, son of the former King Fahd, is among those who've been arrested. So looks like there's definitely a power struggle going on in Saudi Arabia. Now, as you know, yesterday the United Nations Security Council unanimously passed a set of sanctions on North Korea. And they were not the sanctions the United States wanted. But China basically said, if you go forward with these sanctions of an oil embargo and a naval blockade, we will veto. And so in order to avoid the veto, the U.S. dropped these proposals and everybody just passed it on through. It's largely symbolic. It's not really going to have that much of an effect, other than to spur North Korea faster along its nuclear push. And that's exactly what North Korea is saying. They're saying these sanctions are evil, and they're just going to accelerate their push toward creating a nuclear deterrent to avoid invasion by the United States of America. And that is the most sensible thing to do. Because look at Iraq. Gave up their chemical weapons, got invaded by the U.S. anyway. Look at Iran. Given up their nuclear program, still talk about being invaded by the United States. The lesson there is obvious. It doesn't matter what concessions you make. If you are seen as a threat to the U.S. economy, or for any other reason, you're in the crosshairs, you're still going to be attacked no matter what you do to maintain the peace. So it's not worth bothering. And I think that's where Kim Jong-un is coming from. He's recognizing that as soon as he has a demonstrable nuclear deterrent, his country is going to be safe. Now, of course, the corporate media is out there selling the idea that he's being provocative, he's insane, he's crazy. As soon as he has a nuclear weapon, he's going to use it. But they said the same thing about Saddam Hussein. They said the same thing about Ahmadinejad. And it never happened. And again, in all of history, only one country has actually used nuclear weapons of mass destruction against the civilians of another country. And the nation that committed that atrocity is the United States. The whole point of having a nuclear bomb and a missile to fling it is as a deterrent. And you're not going to throw that away for no reason. You're not just going to launch on somebody else because you've got the bomb. Because once you've thrown that deterrent away, you are wide open to attack. The whole point of having nuclear bombs and nuclear missiles, and the U.S. had the same position all during mutually assured destruction in the Cold War with Russia. Having the bombs is what prevented them being used. And the same thing applies here. Russia just tested an ICBM yesterday, launched from Plesetsk. Nobody made a big deal about that. U.S. is testing missiles all the time. Nobody made a big deal about that. It's obvious North Korea is in the crosshairs of the White House for whatever reason. And Trump is out there basically saying that the new sanctions are nothing compared to what must be done. So he's out there thumping his chest and threatening war. He's threatening war on North Korea. Why? North Korea has not done anything other than to develop a defense. When did that become a crime? Do not all nations have a right to self-defense? Do not all nations have a right to deter aggression from the outside? So, and South Korea is not helping things very much. The South Korean Air Force has performed a live-fire military drill for the long-range Taurus missile. This is a 500-kilometer range air-to-surface missile that can hit precise targets basically all over North Korea. It is a bunker buster missile. So they're out there practicing with that one. It's amazing here. Now, China is still very cool on these sanctions, and the U.S. is threatening China with economic sanctions if China does not fully implement the new sanctions against North Korea. And Steve Mnuchin has said the restrictions could involve cutting off Beijing's access to the U.S. financial system. There's only one small problem with that. China is trying to move away from the U.S. financial system already. This would just accelerate the process. Unfortunately, there are way too many people inside Washington, D.C. who still see the United States as this indispensable, critical nation to the future of the world. And that's simply not real anymore. If a giant asteroid, well, let's say if the Yellowstone supervolcano were to blow tomorrow, it would pretty much be the end of the United States as an imperial power around the world. What do you think the rest of the world would do? Well, they'd hunker down for the volcano winter, but they'd go on. The United States is no longer indispensable to the rest of the world. It's no longer the greatest nation on earth, if indeed it ever was. And they got to stop acting like it because they're just annoying the heck out of everybody. And they're still trying to find a way to demonize North Korea. And we've seen that pattern before. Anytime the U.S. wants to invade somebody, oh, they smell bad, they dress funny, they tap dance barefoot on shag carpeting, they pass wind in the elevators, they do horrible things. And so the latest one is that North Korea hackers are targeting Bitcoin exchanges as if China's shutdown wasn't doing enough damage. But they start off this article with a bald-faced lie. North Korea's hackers have been linked with many attacks, including the 2014 Sony hack. And we can stop right there because the so-called Sony hack turned out to be an internal leak that North Korea had nothing to do with. But any lie will suffice on the path to war because truth is the first casualty of war. Now, one of the lies we've been hearing is that Russian units are in the Donbass. Russia has crossed the border. They're in the Donbass. It's leading to war with Russia. The OSCE Special Monitoring Mission has been unable to confirm the presence of Russian troops in the Donbass. Says there are a lot of foreign citizens and weapons in the conflict that seem to have gone there on their own, but no, in point of fact, it's just another lie that Russia has crossed into the Donbass. And we've been hearing that before. Now, Poroshenko may be trying to fan up the conflict because he's in serious trouble. Apparently, the Ukrainian Party for Life said that it was beginning a campaign to gather signatures under a petition for President Poroshenko's resignation. So his own people over there in the western part of Ukraine, they don't want him there anymore. They have suffered greatly under U.S. foreign puppet rule. They want him out. And apparently Poroshenko himself is now saying it is unrealistic to think that Crimea will ever be returned to Ukraine. So apparently he's willing to just put an end to that nonsense as well here. Somebody somewhere played a really dirty trick on Russia, whether it's part of a destabilization operation or just somebody getting revenge. Apparently, there were bomb threats, simultaneous, all across Russia, and resulted in 45,000 people being evacuated, 10,000 in Moscow alone. And apparently, law enforcement is saying that the bomb threats were all organized abroad, meaning coming from somewhere else. So just trying to rattle things over there. The Venezuelan government has agreed to talks with the opposition party. And these are initiated by former Spanish Prime Minister Jose Zapatero and the President of the Dominican Republic, Danilo Medina. And, of course, if they were to come to some kind of agreement, that ends the U.S. subversion of that country. I think more and more countries around the world are saying, you know, I may not like you, but I prefer having peace with you to having the Americans come on in and mess things around for us. So what we have now is a world that is turning away from the U.S. dollar. We've got these rumors that the IMF and the United Nations are going to move to take the U.S. dollar out of the center of the global reserve banking system. They're arguing for a global reserve currency, but it won't be anchored in the United States. Meanwhile, over on BRICS, they're starting to tangle that up with gold. China has announced it's launching a crude oil futures contract that will be priced in the gold-backed yuan, and that can be easily converted to real gold at the exchanges in Shanghai and Hong Kong. So now there's a Cold War for oil officially on, and the seemingly unassailable Brent crude futures are now in for serious competition because they're priced in those paper fiat dollars. Now, in 2000, Iraq began exporting oil in euros. That's why they got attacked. Libya was aiming to create a Pan-African gold-backed dinar. They got attacked. WikiLeaks releases of Clinton's emails revealed the United States had a clear goal of disrupting Muammar Gaddafi's golden years with the years of heck, which Libya is still very much in the midst of. It's all about the money. It's all about forcing the world to use the U.S. dollar. For a small interest payment, of course. And the U.S. government is vulnerable because they've gotten lazy. They've had this Bretton Woods deal for all these years, made a huge amount of money off of forcing every other country on earth to use the U.S. dollar, and they let our manufacturing erode away. And then they made the really big mistake of GMO agriculture. And nobody wants those crops anymore. Monsanto's all around the world arm twisting any corruptible politician they can to force these products on people, but the people don't want them. China will not allow them in. Russia will not allow them in. Russia is exporting non-GMO food, and there is a huge market for it out there. That's what this is all about. A world war over whose brand of ink and paper we're all going to use for the next 100 years. That's what it's really all about. And it's sick. It's psychotic is what it is. Now, the former CEO of Citicorp, Vikram Pandit, is saying that artificial intelligence will replace 30% of banking jobs within the next 5 years. And apparently it's already underway, and this is bad news for all the back office employees. The problem is these systems can spin out of control because these CEOs and executives of these companies may own the physical iron for these machines, but they don't know how they work. They're operating too fast for people to pay attention to what they're doing. The first time they tried high-speed direct trading was back in the mid-'80s, and it just drove the stock market into utter chaos. They're gaming the whole stock market. They're taking it out of the realm of human reaction. If the economic system is all being driven by computers, what role do we have in it anymore? We can't possibly compete against those machines. Good reason to pay off your credit cards and go back to a cash-only economy, I think, here. Now, let's talk about Europe and Sweden. Not that long ago, Sweden was considered one of the world's safest countries. That is now gone. The everyday situation in Sweden is so dangerous that even personnel at Swedish hospitals are in fear for their lives and safety. Ever since the refugees have poured on in, they've got gangs out there, armed gangs, armed with guns, knife fights in the waiting rooms, shooting victims dumped near entrances. It's the new reality of the emergency department at Malmo Hospital. So they're feeling the failure of these globalists to really think through how all these refugees being shoved into Europe was really going to play out. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we're going to go right to the phones here. Kathleen in Paris. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. I'm calling about banking, and I wonder if you know what is the significance of some people are getting messages from their banks that in 2 days, on the 15th, that this ACH, automated clearinghouse, where transactions happen, but they're delayed by 2 or 3 days, that this delay of 2 or 3 days is going to go away and that transactions will happen immediately. So what do you think is the significance of that, and have you heard of it?
I haven't heard about it. I'm doing a little web search here. I mean, there are some places where ACH is slower than others. It may be that they're updating their servers and they're doing a changeover, but they don't want to interrupt the service completely. But I'm seeing a lot of articles here why ACH bank-to-bank transfers take so long. Apparently, ACH can actually delay multiple days. So let's see. ACH transfers within 2 days. And yeah, a lot of people are saying this is an electronic transfer. Why is it taking so long? But my guess is, if you're getting the announcement, is they're getting ready to like change over the computers or something.
Oh, so it's not anything sinister?
No.
Maybe it's just local to this one person's bank. It
could be. It could be.
He was stressed that he was thinking that this 2 or 3 day buffer was a good thing, and that if they're going to start doing immediate withdrawals from his account, I don't know. Anyway, it was just wondering if you knew what that was and what it could mean. And,
well, now that I'm thinking about it, my own local bank about a month ago had an announcement that availability of account data was going to be shut down for 2 days, and they were doing a computer upgrade. I mean, these are the high-traffic computer systems, and every once in a while, you got to go in, you got to replace the hard drives, you got to replace the computers, and that's probably all that it is.
Yeah, it's not bail-ins immediately.
No, I don't think it is. But at least they're letting you know that transfers coming in may be delayed, so you don't write a bad check.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go, and we're coming up here on the top of the hour and station identification. Apparently, Jean-Claude Juncker is out there behaving almost childishly regarding the Brexit. He's saying, "You'll regret it. Brexit isn't everything." Acting like a child. We'll be back after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. We've got a caller waiting on the line, but before I take the phone call, I found out what's going on with the automated clearinghouse transactions as of the 15th. They're not adding a delay. As of the 15th, all delays are being taken out, and they're implementing a same-day rule. And I found this notice basically saying that ACH transactions you initiate or authorize may be presented and deducted from your deposit account on the same day. And what they're doing is sending out a warning because apparently some people were expecting it to take 2 or 3 days, and they'd authorize an ACH transfer, and then they would put the money into the deposit account, and the result would be a bounce check. So they're basically saying make sure the money is really there before you do an ACH payment, which most people do already. But apparently the big deal is they're taking out the delays. And they're saying they're really going to be trying to have it there for happening in the very same day that they initiated. All right, let's go back to the phones. Dale in Ohio. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Okay, we lost Dale. Boy, I hope that hurricane didn't get him. Of course, it's not up there that high. A lot of people are writing on in and say, well, banks, if they think they can make some additional money on it, they'll delay transfers. And, I remember there was a big stink where, we got another phone call. Yvonne in New York, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Aloha. I'm calling about World Trade Center 7. Just a comment. I know everybody knows, of course, that it was, controlled demolition, and there's a lot of evidence. But there's a piece of evidence out there that kind of has gone unnoticed. When they were filming it, before it had collapsed, how all the news crew were out there, there was a police van, and you could see it in live time where these guys, they jump into the van. There's like 9 of them. My husband was one of them, actually. That's why I'm calling. They jumped in the van, and so they jumped in and tore out really fast. And you could see it on TV. There's no doubt about it. It happened. And then it collapses. And it's funny because for years, my husband and I would defend. Well, we would get angry when people would say that the story's not true, and we'd be like, what are you talking about? We were there. Not we. He was there, and he saw it collapse. And then one day my brother says to him, well, you're telling me that you tore out of there and you saw it in the rearview mirror. He says, yeah. He goes, why'd you tear out of there? So my husband's like, well, they told us to. So he's like, why'd they tell you to tear out of there? And he was like, oh, my God, yeah. Like, of course. How stupid, right? They told the cops before it collapsed, run in the van, get out quick. And the reason that they had been there in the first place is they were told to keep people away from the building because it was on fire. But as everybody knows, I mean, this is nothing new. It really wasn't on fire. I mean, he said you could, you just saw a little bit of flames within the building, but it was nothing that he would have considered dangerous. So yeah, they had all these cops stationed outside, keeping people away from the building, and then all of a sudden the cops are told, get in the van, run, and then several minutes later it collapses into its own footprint. So, that's just another piece of evidence or proof that obviously,
yeah,
the whole thing was, And then I had a question to ask you, your opinion. Do you think that because of this debt that we have, because it's odious debt, do you think Donald Trump will ever declare bankruptcy and just tell the Federal Reserve, sorry, we don't owe you anymore?
The odious debt only applies to debts owed to other nations. And basically, it is generally applied when a nation collapses and fails, and those foreign creditors are coming on over and saying, well, look, you owe us all this money, and we'll just start helping ourselves to the physical assets of the country. And the people come back and say, well, look, the money was borrowed for purposes other than the care of our population. Money borrowed for war is considered odious debt. Money borrowed for any repressive actions against the civil population is considered odious debt. And it is something that has been used under international law to free the population of a failed nation from excess debt.
So when they say, I mean, I don't know if they say, I've heard people say we owe China money. Like, have you ever heard that? Like, we're in debt to, or China bought our debt. So, I mean, would that somehow apply to this whole thing of we owe China money? Could Donald Trump say, well, no, we don't? Or is that not how it works?
Well, basically, Donald Trump could say the United States is now in default and all those Treasury bills are worthless. He can't single out China and say that the Treasury bills China has bought are worthless. But that would cause a tremendous amount of chaos with the world economic system.
Well, then just I'm sorry, one more question. So could the Federal Reserve Bank, is that because since they're not part of America, they're almost like an Israeli type of, well, I don't know if they're Israeli, but you know what I mean. They're not really part of our government.
No, they aren't.
That one guy, yeah. So could they be considered foreigners? Could we just say, well, you're a foreign entity and we don't owe you anything? Or
well, some of the owners of the Federal Reserve are in fact foreigners, but again, Congress has the right to shut down the Federal Reserve or revoke its charter anytime they want to. The problem is Congress is willing to continue to sell out the American people to the private central bank because that private central bank shares some of the goodies they get from the American worker with those politicians every campaign season. So it's a systemic problem. The corruption comes out of the Federal Reserve, flows through Wall Street, and showers Washington, D.C.
Right, which is why the swamp needs to be drained.
Yes, or droned.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah,
that'd be even better.
Yeah, drone the swamp. It's faster. All right, Yvonne, we're going to let you.
I like it. All right.
Bye-bye. We're going to let you go here, and we're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And we're going to go right back to the phones to John in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I had a quick question to run by you about vaccine safety.
Yeah.
Normally I'd look something like this up, but I don't really trust all the things that you can even look up on search engines. So some of us, as you know, love our pets.
Yes.
Just like a member of the family. Have you heard anything about your pet vaccinations harming the animal?
Well, yeah. I mean, they're probably just as reckless with the vaccines for the animals as they are for humans. And, in fact, we've got a real story here from Healthy Pets at Mercola.com basically saying that you're really much better off not giving your pets pet vaccines because in many cases the quality control of those medicines is lower than would be required for a human patient.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious about that because I just got a brand new little German Shepherd puppy, and when I took him in for his first examination, they wanted to throw, of course, all the vaccinations at you, and they did talk me into at least giving him the parvo. They said that's one that's very, very necessary, so I did allow them to do that.
Okay.
And I probably should have did this before I took him in, so...
Well, I'm not a veterinarian, you know, and again, I don't know if there's been as much research on pet vaccines as there have been on human vaccines in terms of side effects or after effects. But again, we're seeing so many problems with the human vaccines. It's just a big moneymaker. They want to vaccine everybody. They want to give the HPV vaccine to boys now, even though boys don't have cervixes. But it's just all about the money. It's just all about the money. It's a huge moneymaker.
That's true. All right, Mike. Well, I appreciate your opinion. Thank you.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. Now, getting on over to Europe and immigration. Apparently, Nigel Farage is looking at Jean-Claude Juncker's plan for the future European Union, and basically sees heading toward this undemocratic and Soviet-esque sham. And so he's out there saying, thank goodness we're leaving. The only question is, are they really going to be allowed to leave? This could develop into a war all on its own. Now, Angela Merkel is out there threatening that they're going to kick Hungary out of the EU over its refusal to adhere to Brussels' refugee allocation scheme. She's still on board with this blend everybody together agenda from the global government New World Order people. She's probably dreaming of the day that her particular butt will sit on that golden throne of planet Earth. Today I have Germany, tomorrow the world. Seems that we have heard that somewhere before. Anyway. The real reason that Germany will do anything to stop a hard Brexit is that Germany and Great Britain are very strongly tangled up economically. Many German manufacturers are dependent on the production of parts in Great Britain. And when Great Britain leaves and Brussels is going to throw a tantrum and cut off trade with them, then Germany is going to be slammed. In 2014 alone, the British supplied intermediate goods, that means parts and things used to make other products, not consumer stuff, worth 200 billion euros to the European Union, of which 36 billion went to Germany alone. And that's why Germany absolutely does not want the Brexit to happen. They don't want to lose those suppliers. They used to have suppliers in Russia, but those got sanctioned away. Now, over again in Great Britain, there is an imam. He's preaching in a West Midlands mosque, and apparently is acting as a recruiter for Islamic State. Kamran Sabir Hussein, he's 40 years old, apparently was out there preaching that you should need to be ready to spill blood and establish the law of Allah over the necks of people. And apparently this was reported by an undercover police officer who recorded 17 of the hate preacher's sermons starting in June last year. Yes, isn't it wonderful, all this immigration and refugees coming on into our countries here. Now, over in Catalan, Spain, Madrid absolutely is saying, no, you are not allowed to vote a referendum for independence. And apparently Spain's Constitutional Court has suspended the law that was to become Catalonia's transitional constitution if it declared independence. And apparently The police have been ordered to seize election resources, meaning the ballot boxes and the ballots. Now, all of this, of course, is a violation of the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which Spain has agreed to by being a member of the United Nations. And it says everybody has a right to self-determination, that if there is a portion of the country that is unhappy with the way the country is being run, they have a right to have a referendum to break off and go their own way, the way Crimea did. Now, here's something that is definitely going to get abused. Apparently, there's a new thing on the highway called variable speed limits. And these are apparently remotely controlled signs that declare what the speed limit is on a road, and they can be changed by remote control by the police officers on a whim. And so you can be cruising down the highway, obeying the posted speed limit of 75 miles per hour, only to find out you're being ticketed for driving 15 miles over the speed limit, which is suddenly changed back to 60. And so in cash-strapped America, it is now possible for the police to change the speed limits using variable speed limits signs. And states like Wyoming, Oregon, Georgia, Washington, Utah, New Jersey, Florida, and Minnesota have already begun using them. The U.S. Department of Transportation is paying states $1 billion to use variable speed limits to create, quote, aggressive congestion relief programs, end quote. How will the states pay back the $1 billion? By ticketing motorists, of course. Now, the states are claiming variable speed limits aren't going to be used to create speed traps. But are you really going to believe them? I certainly wouldn't. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Now, a little bit of a follow-up. There was that incident on the UC Berkeley campus where a campus police officer basically harassed this hot dog vendor for not having a permit, wrote him a ticket, and then took $60, all the man had, from his wallet. Was caught on video. Everybody was very upset about this. Somebody set up a GoFundMe campaign for the benefit of this hot dog vendor and his family. It's raised more than $66,000. Enough to buy all the permits that he needs, several more hot dog carts, and put a staff on. So that's good. This was basically an expression of disgust with how overboard the police have become in this country. People don't see the police as a benefit any longer. They're seeing speed traps, they're seeing civil forfeiture, they're seeing tasers, they're seeing innocent people being gunned down. They're seeing the police steal more from law-abiding Americans under the civil forfeiture laws than all the burglars, thieves, and muggers put together. With their brains addled on prescription antidepressants, the police are killing more innocent law-abiding Americans than the terrorists and the mass shooters are. Clearly, Americans are justified in saying they're not a benefit any longer. They're not a blessing on our society. They have become a tool of oppression. Now, this whole thing about Confederate monuments and Confederate imagery has gone a little too far. Down in Tampa, Florida, the oldest magnet school in Hillsborough County was called the Robert E. Lee Elementary. The school board members were going to rename it as part of this nationwide movement to erase the Confederacy. Somebody beat them to it and burned the school to the ground. Act of arson. So this is now way out of control. They were going to rename the school. They were going to take the name Robert E. Lee off of that, put some other name on there. Somebody couldn't wait. Somebody from the PC crowd couldn't wait, went on in and burned this school, the oldest magnet school, to the ground. I'll bet you're feeling really proud of yourself for doing that one there, huh? Or as Ron White would say, you've got to be a real manly man to do something like that, burn down a kid's school, just because you don't like the name on it. Pretty shameful stuff. Alrighty, as you know, we are in a time of new exciting technology developments here, and Apple has finally debuted the iPhone X. Actually, they're calling it the iPhone 10, but the 10 is the Roman numeral X. And it's rather impressive. I don't know that it's going to be a hot seller because the pricing, it's stiff. It's a $1,000 cell phone, and that's going to cool a lot of people. So it's positive points. It's got this nearly bezel-less OLED display, 1125 by 2436 resolution. That's compared to the 1080 by 1920 on the iPhone 7. And so it's got a larger screen. The button has gone away. The fingerprint scanner has gone away. More when we come back from these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about Apple's new iPhone 10 or iPhone X. It was debuted today. It is a higher resolution screen than the iPhone 7 Plus. And because the screen covers the entire front of the phone, there is no home button and no fingerprint scanner. And what there is there is a very thin bar across the top of the phone's front that has several sensors, cameras, a dot projector, and what it does is it makes a 3D model of your face, and that's the new security system. And the idea is because it's a 3D model, it can't be fooled with a photograph, the way they were able to spoof the fingerprint scanner with a photograph. The only problem is when they went to demo it today, it didn't work. It actually failed. Phil Schiller, who's Apple's Senior Vice President of Worldwide Marketing, was unveiling the phone at the Steve Jobs Theater and couldn't get the facial recognition to work. So there may be a little bit of an issue there. Not quite as embarrassing as when Bill Gates was trying to demonstrate plug and play and got the blue screen of death, but still it's embarrassing. But, I mean, for $1,000, I would expect a phone like that to be able to rotate my tires and carry my weights up to the attic for me. That's really way too much money. I think they've made the same mistake with the iPhone 10 that they made with the iWatch. They've just priced it so high that people are going to say, no, it'd be nice to have, but I really can't. All right, let's go back to the phones here. Andre in Oklahoma, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, I would like, aloha. I would like to clear off by, I'm under the understanding that all this insanity on generally the statues, anything with connected to the South, all began with somebody running an ad for demonstrators or actors in Craigslist, and they got a response from these people that were going to be acting as Black Lives Matter, and then the KKK, and they all got off the same bus, and they went about protesting and, acting. Is this true?
Yeah, it's all true. This is all a manufactured sequence of events, and the big issue is what is the agenda? What is the motive? And again, getting back to this globalism, I think it's an attempt to erase our sense of who we are and where we come from in order to make us easier to control. Same reason for the illegal immigrants and the refugees flooding on in. If you flood enough people into the United States of America, it stops being the United States of America and just becomes this kind of twilight zone of blended nationalities. Same thing is happening all over Europe.
Okay, now, if you had enough money, then we could all run our own LADs, because I heard, I went out looking on the internet for this article. I guess it was, they were either paying them $25 an hour or $25 for their protest for the day, or $15. And then I guess one of them didn't get paid, and there was a big uprising about that. But if we all could pay enough people to load up a bus and hold up signs and send them off to the capital of whatever state, saying we don't want to be a part of this government anymore. It's nothing but pulling our country down. Whatever it was, that means we all could sit at home, hire enough people to go out and do our own business and watch whatever happens. If it, the turmoil, people that decide to run over them with cars. And to see the reaction, because I know that Oklahoma's been quick to react to this, and they're trying to change all the schools here, the names of our schools. And now this school was burnt down because it had the name, and it's all stemming from somebody somewhere that hired a bunch of actors to go out and protest. And then this guy called, I guess, yesterday about Larry Silverstein. Oh, I heard that. Should I get off?
Yeah, I'm afraid we've run out of time. We need to do another commercial break, Andre, so thank you for the call. We're going to let you go. Back with another phone call after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the phones. Rob in Illinois. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, thank you, Information Man. How you doing?
I'm doing great.
Good. Glad you're not just hanging in there with all the cats. One of your earlier callers was talking about the vaccines or shots for their pets.
Yes.
Today, it's interesting enough that Alex Jones got into the vaccine territory today, and towards the end of his first hour, beginning of his second, he was into the vaccines and the harms and the dangers of vaccines for humans, but he also crossed over into vaccines and shots for pets. And for instance, one thing he did point out was like perhaps a rabies shot, because every year they'll call you, it's time for your shots and your checkup for your pets and so on. And that's how they're trying to give rabies shots to people's pets every year. But in reality, just like a human's tetanus shot, the human needs a tetanus shot every 7 to 10. I think it's around 10 years. So the same thing with a rabies shot for a pet, maybe around every 7 years. But it's a great thing that he brought up, because too many people in this country and around the world even don't realize the harms and effects of vaccines to human beings, to themselves or the children, let alone to even think about what it's doing to their pets too. So that's a great point he brought up.
Well, it is a valid point here, because apparently there is a CDC-funded medical study that's about to be published by the medical journal Vaccine, and it has confirmed a link between the flu shots and miscarriages in pregnant women. And the study was rejected by 2 previous medical journals before Vaccine agreed to publish it, further underscoring the tendency for medical journals to censor any science that doesn't agree with their pro-vaccine narratives. And so apparently a study published today in Vaccine suggests a strong association between receiving repeated doses of the seasonal influenza vaccine and miscarriage, writes CIDRAP, the Center for Infectious Disease Research and Policy. And so basically they just did this study of these women who'd had miscarriages between 2010 and 2012. And found out that they were more likely to have had the back-to-back flu vaccine shots. So this is the CDC that's come on out and said this, but of course corporate media isn't going to cover it because vaccines are big business.
Absolutely right, and that's why we're glad that we are able to turn into RBN and elsewhere to get this information, and we're not getting there. And I think that was kind of where he started off on this, is that report's being published. And it goes even deeper than that. Again, I don't usually promote InfoWars and whatnot because it's hard to pinpoint what he talks about, because he talks about a variety. You can have one rant, he talks about 6 different things, so it's kind of hard to pinpoint things he says. But in this part, at the end of the first hour, beginning of a second, he zeroes in some vaccine information, which was good. And he also said he's going to do a special report sometime today. We'll see if he carries through with that, so if people want to tune into that. But absolutely. And also this coincides with CDC, what they released that report they did in Africa, right? Remember that one? How the shots that get killed more people than it helped?
Yeah.
That was the recent one?
Yeah, I remember that one.
So, nice for the CDC to be coming here on the back end, huh?
Well, we had the same thing back in 1976 with the swine flu vaccine campaign, mandated a vaccination for everybody. The vaccine killed 50 times as many people as the flu did. But it makes money. It makes money, and as long as it makes money, that's all that's really important. You people are so petty.
Not just the money. They know they're harming us, Mike. They know that these shots and these vaccines are causing more illnesses that people have to go in for because, it's causing pancreatic breakdown. It's causing diabetes. It's causing food allergies. It's causing so much, and then they get something to treat. They know what they're doing. They are hurting us.
Well, certainly that seems to be the indication.
Shot, the food.
For the nagalase, which has been found in vaccines by scientists who unfortunately have met with very suspicious endings. But this nagalase is an enzyme that destroys your body's own ability to fight off cancer. And there's no legitimate reason for it to be in any vaccines. It's got no positive benefit, and yet it's in the vaccines, a chemical that literally makes you vulnerable to cancer, which is a big moneymaker.
Mm-hmm. Look, our bodies, I know you're an atheist, but I'll say this, the good Lord gave us an immune system, and that immune system is supposed to be challenged, so it builds itself. It makes itself stronger. With these shots that they give people, it actually breaks down the immune system. It makes them more vulnerable.
Yes.
Period. And it's, you got a few years on me, but still I'm a 70s child, so we had the measles, we had the mumps, we had the chicken pox, we caught these things, we fought through it, and we lived to fight another day, and we didn't have to wear helmets either.
Yep.
So, it's all with that. Reaching on the last woman's topic, they're paid $25 an hour,
yes,
$50 an hour, depending on the demographic, the event, the portion of the country, so on and so forth. And it isn't just one person, one organization paying them. There's a foreign entity out there that has a concentration of bringing down the United States to blanket us, to erase our history, to erase our culture.
Well, George Soros is a major figure. I mean, Soros is a major figure.
He's a face.
Yeah, he's
a face.
He's
a figurehead.
He's fully on board with this one world government idea, and he doesn't care how many people get injured or even have to die for it to come about. And he's just got the money to spend to try and change the world. And I do not want to live in a nation or a world under the control of a billionaire who was not elected to that job of running our lives. And there are too many people on this planet who think having that kind of money gives them a right to treat the planet and its population like their personal playthings. And I absolutely reject that, whether it's George Soros or Bill Gates or any of these other ultra-billionaires who are out there tinkering with our lives. Anyway, Rob, I'm going to let you go. We're getting tight on time, and I got a couple more calls to get through. Janet in South Florida, thank you for waiting patiently. What's on your mind?
Hi. After Irma, I have two sons. They work in jobs that President Trump bragged about, one a welder and one a Caterpillar owner-operator.
Good.
He talks about a 6% or 6.5% unemployment. He's lying. It is 23%. 93 million Americans are out of work. My two sons have gone through hell since the Bush, Clinton, Bush, Obama administrations, and I'm fed up with it. And I'm fed up with all the lies that come out of Washington. I listened to the woman talk about going in buses, and that's what I would like to be a part of. Because in the Constitution, it clearly states that the first three words in the Constitution are the most powerful. We, the people. And they declare that the Constitution derives its power not from a king or a Congress, but from the people themselves. And this concept of popular sovereignty power to the people is the foundation upon which the entire country and Constitution depends. We are the people. We are the power. And these political boorish cretins in Washington, every single one of them, they work for us. We have the power to go there in busloads and demand that they get to work. And that includes the president, too. I voted for him, and I knew he would win from the very beginning. I never had a doubt about it. But I am sick and tired of seeing my two sons struggle here and in South Florida. One has no roof. The both of them have no electricity and won't have for several weeks. And I am fed up with this government. We have the power, and we need to get together and go after these people. And George Soros is the back of all this trouble. He's got 100 front groups.
Yes.
We don't have to talk about foreign countries. He heads up 100 front groups. Anyone who has no empathy for other people is mentally ill.
I would agree. I would agree.
Where's Jeff Sessions? Where's the Department of Justice? They're no better than the previous two departments.
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. But again, the problem is, if they were actually to pry open the lid of what's really been going on inside that narcocracy, that would be the end. The American people would not stand for a government that is itself the biggest importer of recreational addictive drugs in the country. And that's the reality of what's been going on. Okay?
Absolutely. The Bush family, the Clintons, they became billionaires because of the drugs they helped push in the country. And the CIA is continuing to do it. And our poor kids are sent over there to guard the poppy fields. And now Trump is going to debate about 50,000 more refugees, bringing them in because he's halving what Obama was going to do. 50,000 is 50,000 too many. That's what it is. Too many.
I would agree with you.
We don't have the money. We have too many people here, born in this country for generations, out of work. And these people that are allowed to bring our statues down, to bring our history down. We as Americans have the power to stop them. What the hell's wrong with everybody out there?
Well, I must say you make an eloquent argument, and I agree with pretty much everything that you're saying. The only place where I draw a line is I'm still not ready to encourage or recommend any kind of violence. I still think that this government and this economy are in the process of self-destructing, and we just need to sit back and watch it happen. But I understand and I hear your anger, and you're right. They are lying to us about the unemployment numbers. They're lying to us about pretty much everything. I voted for Trump. I supported Trump. Well, it was more a case of I opposed Hillary Clinton, and I have no regrets about that. But Donald Trump has turned out to be a tremendous disappointment on so many areas, and especially the war policy, because he doesn't realize he's playing with disaster.
Yes.
Okay, well, Janet, thank you for the call. I'm going to let you go because the lines are full here. Janet, thanks an awful lot. Again, very eloquent presentation there. We're going to switch over to Ernest in Nevada. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah. Hi, Mike. Mike, that lady, she had the kind of passion and outrage that Bob Dole was asking, where is the outrage?
Yeah, she does. She does, and that's why I let her go on here. I didn't want to cut her off because she was just, she was making a very eloquent argument and presentation. And I can feel her anger, and I understand it. I feel that way myself a lot of times. But I have to temper that with careful thought about what rhetoric can get people to do that we may regret after the fact. And I get a lot of emails saying I'm obviously shilling for the government because I'm arguing against revolution and uprising. And no, I'm not. It's just common sense. If there's one thing this government is really, really good at, it's killing people. And they won't hesitate to kill 25% of the American population if it means the surviving 75% are loyal, obedient slaves. And so, again, if we rise up against the government, that justifies the government shredding what's left of the Bill of Rights and the Constitution, declaring martial law, and sending the tanks into the streets of the United States. And I really don't want to go there because the wrong people get killed and crippled in these kind of adventures. I still foresee the U.S. government having a Soviet Union-style collapse in the very near future. Could happen even before the end of this year, probably next year. And we just have to be prepared to get through that and launch a new country that goes back to those original constitutional principles and the Bill of Rights. I think we have to keep the Bill of Rights up to the first 13 amendments, maybe the 14th, and just start over from there. And ironclad rule. carved in stone from day one. No more private central banks, no more private central banks, no more private central banks. Okay, anything else?
Well, yeah, Mike, I wanted to ask you, I'm concerned about the Deagle report. I'm still trying to figure out how in the world can we lose 80% of people in this country, and then you have Britain will lose over 50%, and Germany losing 50%, but everybody else almost unscathed. That, to me, is a puzzle. To me, it eliminates a lot of things like Ebola thing or nuclear war or anything like that. To me, it has to be like our country, if anything. How can we lose 80%? Unless something happens to our land, our country. I'm talking about events, seismic, earthquakes, all these things, and I'm trying to figure out how are these things seem to be escalating. And I want to ask you, what is your opinion of an incoming planet that they're talking about, like a planet X that could be affecting?
Yeah, they've been talking about that for a long time. Nobody's ever come up with a set of coordinates where we can put our own telescopes on it and see it. And any planet that was going to be that dangerous to the Earth would be visible well in advance. It's just another piece of the nonsense that the government likes to plant on the internet to make us look like we're all a bunch of kooks and crazies, to try and lure people back to the corporate media. It doesn't work because everybody understands what a poison the well attack actually is. Our biggest threat right now is obviously a supervolcano eruption. And by the way, those quakes in Idaho seem to be tapering down, so we can back off on that one. There's a new Ebola outbreak in Africa. I mean, there's a lot of things that can go wrong that could result in an extinction-level event. Again, I'm concerned about the
extinction level just in certain countries. That's what I'm concerned about. It's why it's just us and Germans and the English.
Well, I don't even know where you're getting that from. Okay, I have no idea where
the Deagle report.
Well, I didn't.
Deagle report.
I didn't listen to.
We're going to lose 80% of our people. The Germans will lose half of theirs.
Okay, well, I didn't listen.
Everybody else. I mean, most people.
I didn't listen to the Deagle report, so I really don't have a basis to work from. But you could have an infectious agent. You could have the epicite gene. There's all kinds of things that could happen that could be really, really bad. We still don't even know how many people we've lost to these hurricanes, and there's 4 more of them forming up in the eastern Pacific headed our way, so we're not out of this yet. Anyway, Ernest, I got to let you go. We're coming up here on a commercial break. Thank you, and we're going to start real quick with Fred in Wisconsin. I may have to take you to the commercial break. What's on your mind?
Yes.
Fred?
Yes, I'm there.
You're on. Well, we're going to have to take a break for commercial now because you didn't start talking. But stay on the line. I'm going to come right back to you as soon as we do this commercial break. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program today. We're talking with Fred in Wisconsin. Fred, what's on your mind?
I hope this is not tinfoil hat, but I was listening to a woman who has a book coming out. I believe she's a scientist. Is making a connection between the CERN, the HARP, and something I believe she called either Skynet or Sky Fence. And I just wondered if you'd heard anything about this.
No, well, first of all, I mean, CERN is just a particle accelerator, and they just got it back online after a renovation and an upgrade. HARP was an early attempt at a synthetic aperture radar operating in the shortwave bands that could bounce off the ionosphere and image incoming enemy ships and planes over the horizon. And last I heard, it really didn't work all that well. All this talk about making auroras and changing the weather was the cover story to keep you from figuring out what was really going on. Skynet, of course, is the fictional name of a global battle computer system from the Terminator series. Okay?
Thank you very much for filling me in. Thank you.
All right, we're going to switch to Rick in Arizona. Aloha, Rick. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, what's on my mind today, Mike? Trump, that lady needs to listen to Eric Hughes at 9 o'clock. And what happened? I mean, how did the human race, Mike, make it before germ theory and penicillin? I mean, I don't think there's anything the city of disease control can manufacture to kill off the human race.
Well, it takes a lot to kill off the entire human race. I mean, when the Toba supervolcano exploded 66,000 years ago, mitochondrial DNA testing shows that the entire human population for the entire planet shrank down to just 8,000 individuals. But obviously, 8,000 was enough to repopulate.
Yeah. No, I'm not worried about it. I'm more worried about white supremacy. So, well, that's all I got for today, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot here.
All right, thanks.
We're going to switch to Chance in West Virginia. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, hello, Michael. You know, I totally agree with those two women. What they mean, I guess, is massive civil disobedience, which we need. You know, Michael, there's nothing, I'm sure you agree, there's nothing stronger in this world than a mother's love and concern for her children.
Yes.
And you can tell in those women's voices. I agree with them. Massive civil disobedience, not violence, like you mentioned, but massive civil disobedience is what's needed. Do you agree?
Well, in the spirit of Gandhi, where you simply stop cooperating with the government, you stop filling out the paperwork, you stop showing the ID cards, you stop, doing as you're told. Again, as long as it's nonviolent, yeah, maybe the time has come. But the problem is the government will send people in there to commit acts of violence to blame on the protesters. We've already seen them do it with Black Lives Matter and Antifa, and then they'll unleash, their all these weapons they've built up to use against us. Anyway,
what is the choice?
Again, I think this government is headed for a Soviet Union-style collapse. I'm seeing all the same indicators that we saw in the last months of the Soviet Union. And I counsel patience and everybody just holding it together. All right, we're out of time. The music is there. I apologize to the callers I wasn't able to get to today. Stay tuned for John Stadmiller's program. He's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Share what you learn here with all of your friends and associates. We've got to get the truth out there while we still can. The government's coming to shut us all down here, so that they can go back to leading you all with lies. We need the truth to get out there far and wide. We need your help to do it. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.